Puff Daddy was convicted on 2 counts, including former girlfriends. The idea that they were being trafficked to these freak-offs, to these parties against their will. So he's found guilty of that. 2 counts. Each count he gets 10 years for, or he could get 10 years, so 20 years total. Judge has the discretion, no mandatory sentencing on this one, and he's already served 10 months. Chris, if you're a judge, how much time do you give him?
Man, so you put me on the spot.
Welcome to episode 77 of the Weekly Docket, Silberman Law Firm podcast. Today is July 3rd, 2025. I'm Phil Silberman, owner of the firm and your host. And I'm joined by Chris Heald, my co-host, who's the firm's supervising attorney. Chris, will you be seeing any fireworks on the 4th of July this year?
I imagine so. I'm in Vegas, so I think there will be fireworks aplenty.
Vegas has fireworks probably all the time, regardless whether it's the 4th of July or not. So that's going to be a safe bet, pun very much intended, that you will see some fireworks. So very good on that. All right, let's go ahead and talk about what we're covering on the show today, what's on our docket. First thing we're talking about is some legal news. In our legal news section, we've got Lululemon has sued Costco, the wholesaler, for selling knockoff athletic wear. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then in our legal questions section, we're going to be talking about the Mann Act. That's M-A-N-N, the Mann Act, because Sean Diddy Combs was just convicted of that law. And we're going to talk about what is it and how much time he's going to get. And then finally, in our rant and rave section, my favorite part of the show, we've got some pretty cool AI quotes from CEOs, and we're going to be talking about whether we believe them, whether it's real or it's all hype, and how does that affect law firms. Good show today. Let's go ahead and get it kicked off with our legal news section, and this is the Lululemon case. Now, Chris, do you own any Lululemon, or do you wear Lululemon?
Stock or apparel?
Apparel, or either.
My wife does. I certainly do not.
Okay. Now, I'm a big Costco fan, Chris. I shop at Costco. In fact, I buy most of my clothes at Costco or the pro shop for my tennis club. Big fan of Costco. And Costco's allegedly selling some knockoff versions of the scuba clothing or the popular ABC men's pants. Now, I don't know what either of those are, but I do know that the pants, for example, cost $120 at Lululemon, but you can buy them at Costco for $20. So loving Costco, it made me want to look up the pants and maybe go buy the pants. But so Lululemon files this lawsuit. It's basically a copyright lawsuit. And Chris, it's a really hard lawsuit. We don't do a lot of intellectual property work. Although I think we just took a case on copyright infringement, but it's an open and shut case about book sales on Shopify. That's traditional kind of copyright law. You clearly can't sell somebody else's book that you don't have the copyright to on Amazon or Shopify. That's an easy one. But fashion is a little bit
scare me
harder.
when you say that's an easy one, but all right.
No, that's pretty easy.
We'll revisit this in 2 years when we're still litigating it.
Look, okay, so the essence of copyright is the copyright regime or law is meant to protect the original works of authorship. As soon as the author fixes the work in a tangible form of expression, it's really meant for creative works. And the traditional stuff is if you write a novel, if you write a poem, or if you paint a piece of art. Now, fashion in the United States is a little bit more difficult because, Chris, you and I are both wearing collared shirts. And if I go start another company and I want to sell a collared shirt, it's really hard to argue that my version of this collared shirt, for example, is somehow falls under some sort of copyright protection. Because if remember those collars they wore in the 70s, right?
I wasn't around in the 70s. I'm sorry.
Okay. You surely have seen Austin Powers, the movies, and you've seen some movies based in the 70s, right? They all had those big collars on. Yeah. So it would be really hard to say, all of a sudden, I have this really huge collar and it goes all the way down the middle of the shirt. And I want to argue that is protected under copyright. Chris, what do you think? Would that be an original work of creative expression? My fashion statement on that collared shirt?
I would guess not. I don't know. You're right that, everybody, and we call them polos too much to the probably delight of Polo, who maybe started it, maybe didn't. I don't know the history, but it seems like everybody has a solid colored shirt with their logo on it, right? There's 8
Yeah.
million different types of those shirts. They all just have a different Brooks Brothers, Polo, whatever, just has their logo on it and it's the same shirt. So it seems
Yeah.
hard to copyright that.
It's in the United States. Okay, spoiler alert. In the United States, it's really hard to get copyright protection for fashion. It's actually much easier in Europe. That's a societal value. All of the fashion came from Europe. Europe wants to protect that. But in the US, very hard to get copyright protection for fashion. And Lululemon is going to have an uphill battle. Here's 49-page complaint or petition. I'm not sure, probably a complaint, was arguing that look, the pants look very similar, the shirts look very similar, and not only do they look similar, but Costco's also using the same color terms. And there's this color called Tidewater Teal. And that's the same description that Lululemon uses. Now, to me, Chris, I don't think you can say, okay, I've come up with this color called Tidewater Teal, and that's somehow this original expression protectable under copyright. That sounds like a better trademark argument. It seems to me like Lululemon should be trademarking that and then have that protection, but they may not have registered that mark. They may not have that kind of protection. That color may not fall under trademark protection.
I feel like do that. They come up with a creative name for their colors and then they trademark that because that's really all you can do. And so what you want is to get people affiliating that name with your brand. That's the best you can do. Otherwise, again, it's just a whole rainbow of colored shirts. And to a lesser extent, pants, but it would seem harder to trademark pants. What about jeans? Don't all jeans look alike? I'm sure jean experts would be able to tell me the differences in styles in different years, but for most of us, it's a pair of jeans.
Yeah, no, for certain. And just to be clear, to continue on with your jeans example, Levi, okay, Levi, and the little red tag that sticks on the outside of the pocket, that is protected under trademark. And that's how they let everyone know you're wearing a pair of Levi's and not some kind of knockoff Walmart dupe or whatever. Who knows? Walmart may sell Levi's, but that's how you know that you're wearing the real Levi. And in the collared shirt example, the Vineyard Vine whale, that's protected under trademark, or the guy riding the horse, that's protected under a trademark, or the alligator Lacoste, that's protected under trademark. But the design of the collared shirt itself is not protected under copyright. So Lulu knows this is an uphill battle. They got into a similar type of fight with Peloton over some athletic gear, I think. And that ended up as a 5-year strategic partnership. I don't see that happening with Costco. I think they're going to end up litigating this. I'm not sure Lululemon is on the right side of the law on this one, but they're vigorously trying to prosecute this. And here's something interesting I did not know, Chris. Like among Gen Z, there's this whole kind of dupe culture, like a dupe hashtag. And they're very proud that they're not spending big money on the pants. And they want to say, no, I got this for a discount. So Costco's kind of riding the wave of Gen Z culture here. And Lululemon's got an uphill battle. Any other thoughts, Chris, before we move on?
Yeah, don't you think that's a bad look for Lululemon too? Because if you're a designer brand, we grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s to a lesser extent, but I'm not a fashionista. I don't think you are either, but I think the culture and I think the play is always, hey, we're the designer brand. Go ahead and knock us off all you want. We're the designer. People are going to know what it is. We're going to produce better quality. We're not going to pay attention to what you're doing. You're not worth our time. And this is the exact opposite of that. This is, hey, we have the $120 pants. We're Lululemon. We have standalone stores in high-end retail facilities. Oh, but now we're worried Costco's going to take our market share. We're worried about Costco. That would seem to be a pretty bad look saying, oh, you're selling the same pants we're selling, even if they're not, you're giving voice to them. You're giving credibility to them, which seems to fly in the face of what these designer brands have always done, which is just take the high road of you're just not worth our time.
Yeah, and that's a point well taken from a PR standpoint. I think you just need to own the fact that we're the Lululemon brand, and you just generally make the statement our stuff is higher quality. Whether that's true or not, who knows? I don't know this for certain, but my guess is a lot of these brands are having this stuff manufactured in outside of the United States, and people always suspect, they always say, and TikTok has said this, buy the same stuff from the factory that this big brand, where this big brand makes it. I'm not saying that's Lululemon, but the allegations on TikTok are, okay, the big brands are manufacturing in the same factory, so buy it without the brand for 80% less. And that's been really appealing on TikTok. Now, the big brands have fought back. Oh, no, that's absolutely not true. Those aren't coming from our factories. Our factories are higher quality. That's the road that, Chris, you're pointing out maybe the executive should have taken. And I tend to agree with you. I think that's a better look because this Costco story has gotten a lot of press.
Yeah.
And for me, it caused me to go to Costco and be like, hey, look, I'm on Costco.com. Let me see what I can buy. So
Here's
I think,
Chanel or Louis Vuitton getting worried about knockoff bags. They know the knockoff bags exist, and they know that anyone can spot a knockoff bag. So they're just going to keep making their bags, and they're going to keep
yeah.
being the leader, and they're not going to sue these other people.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we got to move on to our next section. That's our legal question section. And we're talking about what is the Mann Act? Because P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, whatever he's called, Sean Diddy Combs, he was just convicted of this Mann Act. He was acquitted of more serious crimes. If everybody knows, okay, this rapper, this mogul, this music producer, whatever he is, he was having all these things called freak offs. They're pretty graphic display. I'm not going to get into details, but pretty graphic displays of sexual acts taking place among, I think they were all adults. There was the whole debate of whether they were consenting. That was the whole trial. But he was acquitted of sex trafficking, which is a pretty serious crime. On the assault stuff, the limitations period had run, so they could not charge him with that. So the prosecution ends up getting him on the Mann Act. Chris, had you heard of the Mann Act before?
Not before 12 minutes ago.
I had not either, at least more before the whole Diddy thing. The Mann Act, all right, enacted in 1910, also known as the White Slave Traffic Act of 1910. It's a federal law that criminalizes the transportation of any woman or girl for the purpose of prostitution or debauchery or for any other immoral purpose. A very vague, very general act. It arose out of a 1907 problem of immigrant prostitutes. A lot of upstanding citizens in America, they decided that immigrant women were being brought to America and trafficked to America for purposes of prostitution. And that wasn't good. But on top of that, it had this very broad immoral purpose. And in the law, and interestingly, in 1917, there was this case, Caminetti v. U.S., that the thing started to get used for prosecution of any illicit fornication, even when it was consensual. And it was also used to prosecute like interracial relationships. So clearly, that is not good law anymore. In fact, it was amended in 1978 and later in 1986. You had to have it connected to some other real crime. All right. So you have to connect it to like child pornography. It's been used for that. I think R. Kelly was also prosecuted under this thing back with the whole R. Kelly thing. But it was amended in 1978, 1986, and is connected to other crimes. The immoral, sort of vague and ambiguous standard that was dropped a long time ago, but that history is very interesting. Puff Daddy was convicted on 2 counts, including former girlfriends. The idea that they were being trafficked to these freak offs, to these parties against their will. So he's found guilty of that, acquitted on the lesser crimes. 2 counts, each count he gets 10 years for, or he could get 10 years, so 20 years total. Judge has the discretion, no mandatory sentencing on this one, and he's already served 10 months. Chris, if you're a judge, how much time do you give him?
Man, see, you're putting me on the spot. I don't What's he being convicted of? Not to make you explain the whole thing over again. Sex trafficking is bad. If I'm minors or people against their will, that sounds really bad. But what did he do? Just inviting people to parties or
Yeah, his whole defense really was like, look, I've been addicted to drugs. Yes, I have been violent. I'm embarrassed and ashamed of all that. And my personal life is I'm really into consensual, very, I don't know if he used the term freaky. Okay.
anything
Consent,
consenting adults do should,
right.
but if he was saying, hey, there's going to be a bunch of girls there and he's inviting girls and he's inviting his friends and these girls don't really know what they're getting
Yeah.
into. And then he's pressuring people to do things they don't want to do. That's definitely a bad thing. It sounds like that's what you're saying is if I have a boat, going back to the immigration thing, right? If someone says, hey, I've just got 20 people I need to get over here from overseas. And I say, cool, my cost is
Mm,
this. And you hire my boat and I bring them over and I'm none the wiser, then I haven't committed a crime. But if I know you're slave trading or sex trafficking or doing something like that, that's what it sounds like this law is for, to put some liability on me because I'm knowingly assisting somebody in doing something bad, even though I'm not
Well,
doing it.
yeah. What the prosecution really wanted to get him on was the actual sex trafficking.
Right.
Okay. And that's a much more serious crime. And they couldn't get him on that. Their argument, interestingly, was he controlled these girls and that he was forcing to do these sex acts by buying them, giving them money and buying them lavish houses. That was the prosecution's argument. That did not work according to criminal legal scholars because sex traffickers actually do the opposite. They typically deprive the victims of money. They don't give them means and resources. And the legal scholars said the jury got this right because the testimony from the purported victims were that they were basically taking the money, taking the houses, and engaging in these parties, so they knew what they were doing. Okay, this wasn't. It was tit for tat. It wasn't like an enslaved trafficking or capturing of control, which is the typical sex trafficking element where I don't mean it is very sad. It's a big problem. It's a big problem all over the world where you're actually kidnapping, capturing women from, say, Eastern Europe or Vietnam or wherever. And then against their will, they're being brought to places like Houston and they're being deprived of all kinds of resources. And they really are being controlled and enslaved. That wasn't what was happening. They were completely free living in a lavish, expensive house with all kinds of means and resources. So the criminal minds say they got that, but
Yeah,
got
curious to see during sentencing, don't alleged victims testify too? I would be curious to hear what their take is. Is their take, hey, no, I was consenting. This guy doesn't need to go to jail. Or do they really feel like, no, I was overpowered
well,
by the celebrity and the money? And did I have a choice to go? Maybe, but was I overpowered and my will subverted? I'd be curious
yeah.
to hear their take on
Well,
that before
well,
issuing.
let me tell you a couple more facts and then see if we can get an answer out of you. The prosecution is going to ask for 5 years, most likely. Okay,
Concurrently or consecutively?
I believe concurrently.
Okay.
Okay. And the defense is going to ask for 27 months. And the judge is not required to give, there's no mandatory sentencing here. And by the way, big shocker, this was a shocker to me. Diddy was denied bail with about a 1 minute hearing because I thought for certain he was going to get bail and walk out of that courtroom because he was convicted one on a very kind of small charge, really. And then two, is he a flight risk? Is he a danger to the public? The judge said, hey, look, your defense was essentially admitting that you were a danger and violent because your defense was, yeah, I beat these women. It was a bad thing. You admitted that. One, you are a danger to the public and because you were beating people in drug fueled rages. And then 2, you're wealthy, so you're automatically a flight risk. So I was shocked that the judge denied bail, but knowing that, you want to hazard a guess or?
I'm going to leave it up to the judge.
Okay. Based on the fact the judge denied bail, I'm going to say the judge gives the guy 4 years. That's my gut feeling on this deal.
The under.
If
If we're just gambling, I'll take.
You are in Vegas
Yeah.
on the 4th of July, which is either very American or very un-American, depending upon how you look at that. But all right, we got to move on to the rant and rave section. You're not a fan of AI, but I'm going to make you a believer. We've got some AI
Also
quotes
not going to
from-
happen.
We've got some AI quotes from CEOs, okay? And we got to figure out, do you believe it? Is it real or is it hype?
When you say AI from CEOs, these are not quotes from CEOs. These are AI quotes.
No, I don't mean it like that. I mean that these are real people, real CEOs. All right. So here's a quote from the big car manufacturer, Ford, Chief Executive Jim Farley. Here's his quote: "Artificial intelligence is going to replace literally half of all white collar workers in the US." All right. Here's one. Now that one is maybe biased, maybe not biased, but the next one, Anthropic CEO. Now this one is biased because he runs an AI company, right? I don't know how to pronounce his name. Sario Amode, however you pronounce that. He said in May, half of all entry-level jobs could disappear in only 5 years, resulting in U.S. unemployment of 10 to 20%. And he told company executives to stop sugarcoating the situation. That's what he says. And then finally, we've got CEO Micah Kaufman of Fiverr, which is like this big gig if you need like a logo design or something like that. This is a wake-up call. He wrote, "It does not matter if you are a programmer, designer, product manager, data scientist, lawyer, customer support rep, salesperson, or finance person. AI is coming for you." All right, I agree or disagree, Chris? Is it hype or is it real?
Oh, it's real. They're coming for us.
Okay, so you're now a believer they're coming for us, and we're all going to be out of work, right?
What do you mean now? I've always said that. I've always been that.
I didn't know that.
Why I hate. There was a movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger in it that we know what happens, and yet we're still allowing it to happen. I don't understand it. We all know how this story ends, and we're just blissfully walking towards it.
All right, we're a legal show, so let's talk about our law firm. Let's talk about how we have adapted our firm for AI, because we have a lot of lawyers out there, a lot of accountants, a lot of professional people listen to the show. Here's just a list of me as the firm owner and the firm CEO, basically. And here's what I've done. We used to employ a technical writer to write blog posts, Chris, and that job went away. We no longer need a technical writer to write blog posts. We used to have our junior lawyers write blog posts. That went away. We no longer have the junior lawyers write blog posts because we can do that through AI. We replaced our US-based bookkeeper with an offshore bookkeeper, but a lot of that, granted, that wasn't replacing the bookkeeper with AI, but a lot of it was driven by AI because the offshore bookkeeper, through the support of AI, can basically, in my mind, give us the same quality, if not better quality, than the US-based bookkeeper. We have a ChatGPT accounting assistant to help that offshore bookkeeper. And then we replaced our US-based marketing person. We used to have a full-time US-based marketing person, and we replaced them with an offshore marketing person at a big cost savings and I never could do that before because the US-based person would write copy. Their prose was US-based, it was high level, and everything we do in marketing is copyright, a lot of copywriting. And I couldn't do that. But now with ChatGPT, the offshore marketing person can generate almost everything using ChatGPT, and the grammar and the quality of the writing is better than US-based. Our US-based marketing person.
If that's what you're saying, that I'm a believer, that you've completely lost me, and that's
okay.
No. It is not as good. None of it is as good. The legal writing, the blog writing, ChatGPT is definitely not as good. What ChatGPT is good enough to come and take all our jobs. That's what it is. It is not as good. It would never be as good as lawyers writing motions that are well-crafted, thought out, articulated, and persuasive. Will ChatGPT ChatGPT be able to write a motion that's good enough that eventually consumers are going to say, why do I need to pay $500 an hour when I can use this other tool? Yes, that's the downfall of society. So all the high level
Okay.
thinking will go away and we will have good enough.
I agree with your point. In fact, Charles Dickens, way before AI, almost prophetic almost, he talked about the difference between constructed content and creative content. What Charles Dickens was writing was creative content, okay? Our legal writing is more of constructed content. It doesn't have to be super creative. It just has to take the facts, apply them to the elements. It's more like a technical type of writing, which does lend itself to AI a little bit more. Now, Chris, you're saying the quality isn't there. We've been using it for demand letters. We have a ChatGPT like intake legal assistant. I think it's been great because I'm the guy on the front end that does the initial training for our lawyers. I think it's really been great for taking a lawyer that's new to our practice areas and being able to give them a tool that levels the playing field to a one or two lawyer that's been practicing in our areas for a while. That doesn't mean, Chris, the AI legal assistant is going to get them to your level or my level by any stretch of the imagination. But I've found it to bring it up to that lawyer up to speed very quickly. Chris, now I will say this: we're doing the opposite. We're currently adding more attorney headcount right now to get more billable hours. So we're not completely, even though I'm a big AI person, I'm not quite living this out yet. Because if I was really living this out and this whole AI is going to replace us and we're going to immediately be more efficient, I would be dropping attorney headcount and getting more billable hours. And we have not been able to do that. We are not doing that. We're adding attorneys to get more billable hours. Do you ever see us, Chris, getting to a point where we could drop attorney headcount to get more billable hours? Or you see it as more AI supporting the lawyers?
Potentially, but again, I don't love it.
Yeah.
I have a different take on it than you. I think it's just the new relying on something else. If you remember when we were in law school, that, everything, you didn't have all these tools. And so everything had to be original. It had to be your original work. You had to think about, how do I write this? And now the first thing every attorney at our law firm does is, hey, has someone done this before? Can I look at it? They want to see else already did. And then they want to fill in the blanks. And so AI is just the next evolution of that. Now I don't even have to go look at what someone else did. Now I could just have AI do it for me and I can say, okay, cool. I don't ever have to use thinking. I think that's a bad thing.
Yeah. See, I don't practice day in and day out anymore. I wonder if I were to go back to practicing for a while, if I could use ChatGPT to do the work of 3 or 4 lawyers, right? If I could manage, or 2 lawyers, could I double my litigation files by being more efficient with the writing, with the analysis? Could I double my transactional files by relying heavily on AI to supplement? And that's what's supposed to happen. That's what these big tech companies are selling us. Microsoft is selling us software products with an AI backbone saying, you don't need as many programmers anymore. And Microsoft at some point has to try to live that out because Microsoft just cut 9,000 jobs. At some point, they have to be able to say, we're Microsoft and we're using our own products and we don't need programmers anymore. Now, as many programmers anymore. So I don't know. Could we take an attorney? Could we train them? Could we say, look, you really have to rely on AI because we want you to get double the productivity out of one attorney? Maybe not. There are a lot of CEOs out there that are making the counter argument, which is we're not seeing this reduction yet. So they're saying it's hype, that it's not real.
What about the other effect, which has been going on for a little while? Again, the internet lending itself to people being able to find research papers and copying them, and now ChatGPT writing papers for college kids. What about that? If they're just going to look at you and say, everything's going to be ChatGPT, everything's going to be AI anyway, why do I need anything? I think there's bigger effects here. And yes, you're exposing my bias and I make no bones about it. I just think it's so bad, but there have to be people in every generation that are resistant to technology, and I will carry that burden.
There was a recent study. I did not have it on the show, so forgive me if I get this wrong, but there was a study about AI brain rot, but effectively what's happening is if you're not taking the time to do the writing, to do the critical thinking day in and day out anymore, and you've never done that as a young person, you're not developing, you're not doing that critical thinking. So it's setting us back from a societal standpoint. And that was part of the study. And that could very much be what's going on. I had my brother-in-law I was visiting my brother-in-law the other day, and he's an accountant, and he was saying his young lawyers can no longer, not young lawyers, his young accountants can no longer do mental math. And it was like basic stuff. Take 105 from 85, right? They want to pull out a calculator to do that.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, just do it in your head. And there's some of that going on. Maybe it's AI fueled. I don't know, but.
And that's a good measuring stick too. Like people who can do math it's pretty indicative of, okay, that's the kind of person you are. Like it really, with apologies to people who may be not great at math, but I do think it's generally a good measuring stick. If someone's really good and really quick, that sort of indicates to you how sharp they are and how quick they are to.
Maybe a good interview question for our young people is, hey, I'm going to ask you a math question, and it's going to be a very simple multiplication question, and you need to answer it in 5 seconds. And it could be something like, what's 302 times 3?
I would be a fan of
and
that.
They've got 5. Yeah, and then seeing who gets it. All right. That brings our show to a close. I've been your host, Phil Silverman. Chris has been my very gracious co-host. Like us, follow us, review us wherever you get your podcast. And as a reminder, nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice, and this has all been for entertainment purposes only. If you have a legal question, email us at info@silblawfirm.com. That's info@silblawfirm.com. Tell us you want it publicly answered in the podcast. Everybody have a great 4th of July.
Adios.